Dear students, welcome to the first part of the video lecture on the chapter On Running After One's Hat by G.K. Chesterton. This is a chapter from the third semester core course text Appreciating Prose prescribed for the UG program of Calicut University BA English Language and Literature. This chapter is included in the section 2 of this text. What you are seeing here on the screen is the complete chapter. I have highlighted the difficult words in yellow and their meanings in grey. Pictures are given as illustrations, which is definitely going to make your job easy. And also below each paragraph, you will get a short analysis of the paragraph with a critical appreciation. This will be useful for you for your exams. If you don't have the textbook also, you can manage with this video. So shall we begin? I'll read the essay giving explanations wherever needed. Please listen to it. Here it is. On Running After One's Hat by G.K. Chesterton. I feel an almost savage envy on hearing that London has been flooded in my absence while I am in the mere country. My own Battersea has been, I understand, particularly favoured as a meeting of waters. Battersea was already, as I need hardly say, the most beautiful of human localities. Now that it has the additional splendour of great sheets of water, there must be something quite incomparable in the landscape or waterscape of my own romantic town. Battersea must be a vision of Venice. The boat that brought the meat from the butchers must have shot along those lanes of rippling silver with the strange smoothness of the gondola. The greengrocer who brought cabbages to the corner of the Latchmere Road must have leaned upon the oar with the unearthly grace of the gondolier. There is nothing so perfectly poetical as an island, and when a district is flooded, it becomes an archipelago. This is the first paragraph of our essay. So shall we read it again? I feel an almost savage envy on hearing that London has been flooded in my absence while I am in the mere country. So Chesterton was not there in his native place, that is London. He was in some other town, that is mere country. Mere is a small town and civil parish in Wiltshire, England. That means he was not there in London when it was flooded. My own Battersea is his hometown. It is a district of southwest London. My own Battersea has been, I understand, particularly favoured as a meeting of waters. So he is imagining about what all things he heard about the flood situation in London from a distant place. He is imagining how the water must have covered his hometown, Battersea, and he is telling, my place is favoured as a meeting of waters. It is totally covered with water now. That is what he means. Battersea was already, as I need hardly say, the most beautiful of human localities. So he is telling his hometown, that is Battersea, is so very beautiful, and now that it has the additional splendour of great sheets of water. So he is telling that now the whole place is underwater, and he is telling that this must have increased the beauty of that land. There must be something quite incomparable in the landscape or waterscape. He is correcting it. Now the place is covered with water, no? So that is the reason why he is telling it's a waterscape. That is a better word of my own romantic town. Battersea must be a vision of Venice. So he is comparing his hometown to Venice. You know this place, Venice? Venice is the capital of northern Italy's Veneto region. It is built on more than 100 small islands in a lagoon in the Adriatic Sea. So Venice is so very attractive because of this. It is built on, this whole town is built on some 100 small islands. And these islands are joined through bridges. So people used to travel through these water strips or lagoon, and these bridges forms a sort of connection between two places. As the picture shows, this is a picture where you can see how the people travel there in Venice. And also there is a place in our Kerala which is called Venice of the East. You know the place? A district is there in our state which is called Venice of the East. Yes, it is Alleppey or Alappuzha. This particular place is also so very beautiful because of the backwaters. In this place you will get so many bridges as well. So like in Venice. So that is the reason why Alappuzha is called the Venice of the East. Now coming to our essay, the boat that brought the meat from the butchers must have shot along those lanes of rippling silver with the strange smoothness of gondola. I told you he is comparing his land, that is Battersea, with Venice. So like in Venice, they used to do their business by traveling in a special kind of boat which they call gondola. Gondola is actually a traditional flat-bottomed Venetian rowing boat. Exactly like what you see in this picture. He is imagining how the street vendors, the butcher who is selling meat, the greengrocer who is selling his vegetables, how they are moving about in these boats and selling their products to people. Once it was a lane, now it is covered with water, so they are coming in boats. The greengrocer who brought cabbages to the corner of the Latchmere Road must have leaned upon the oar with the unearthly grace of the gondolier. Gondolier is a Venetian boatman who propels a gondola. There is nothing so perfectly poetical as an island. Of course, island itself is so very beautiful, so poetical. And when a district is flooded, it becomes an archipelago. Island is a poetical place. Poetical here means a beautiful place. And if a district is flooded means it becomes an archipelago. Archipelago actually means a group of islands. And sometimes a sea containing a small number of scattered islands. So just like you see in the picture, you can see here small islands in a sea. So this is what you call, such a group of islands is what you call archipelago. So he is telling that the district, when a whole district, when it is flooded, it looks more like an archipelago. It is a beautiful sight. Okay. What do you feel about this paragraph? Of course, he is talking about a very serious issue, floods. When you talk about floods, you always talk about the destruction caused by the floods. So you cannot imagine a person telling about floods like this. At least for us now, we understand how serious an issue this flood is. Now we'll go to the analysis. So this is like notes for you. You can use it as your notes. Chesterton is feeling jealous for the people of his hometown because he couldn't get a chance to enjoy the splendid beauty of his hometown Battersea in floods. He compares his hometown with Venice. He imagines how the street vendors would have been doing her business traveling in gondolas. This is a highly romanticized vision of a flooded place. But this may be because Chesterton was staying in a distant place at that time. He is not having a first-hand experience of the floods. He was not experiencing the ill effects of the floods. We are sure those who experience floods can never see it in a poetical way. But here, Chesterton is trying to bring us a totally different aspect of such a terrible situation by stressing the point that looking at the most inconvenient situations from a positive angle would lessen the mental strain associated with it. Hope you understood the first paragraph. Shall we move on to the second one? Okay, now I am going to read the text, the paragraph as such. Don't bother about the highlighted meanings. Now I am reading the text. Please listen. Some consider such romantic views of flood or fire slightly lacking in reality. But really, this romantic view of such inconveniences is quite as practical as the other. The true optimist who sees in such things an opportunity for enjoyment is quite as logical and much more sensible than the ordinary indignant ratepayer who sees in them an opportunity for grumbling. Real pain, as in the case of being burned at Smithfield or having a toothache, is a positive thing. It can be supported but scarcely enjoyed. But after all, our toothaches are the exception, and for being burned at Smithfield, it only happens to us at the very longest intervals. And most of the inconveniences that make men swear or women cry are really sentimental or imaginative inconveniences, things altogether of the mind. For instance, we often hear grown-up people complaining of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train. Did you ever hear a small boy complain of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train? No, for to him to be inside a railway station is to be inside a cavern of wonder and a palace of poetical pleasures. Because to him the red light and the green light on the signal are like a new sun and a new moon. Because to him, when the wooden arm of the signal falls down suddenly, it is as if a great king had thrown down his staff as a signal and started a shrieking tournament of trains. I myself am of little boys' habit in this matter. They also serve who only stand and wait for the 2:15. Their meditations may be full of rich and fruitful things. Many of the most purple hours of my life have been passed at Clapham Junction, which is now, I suppose, under water. I have been there in many moods so fixed and mystical that the water might well have come up to my waist before I noticed it particularly. But in the case of all such annoyances, as I have said, everything depends upon the emotional point of view. You can safely apply the test to almost every one of the things that are currently talked of as the typical nuisance of daily life. Coming to the discussions on Para 2. In Para 1, we saw Chesterton was so fascinated by the beauty of London in floods that he felt jealous of the people of London. As readers, we must have definitely felt that Chesterton's views are highly romantic, is it not? So he says, some consider such romantic views of flood or fire slightly lacking in reality, but really, this romantic view of such inconveniences is quite as practical as the other. He himself knows very well that at least for some what he had said might sound highly romantic, but he says that such a romantic view is practical and sensible. The true optimist who sees in such things an opportunity for enjoyment is quite as logical and much more sensible than the ordinary indignant ratepayer who sees in them an opportunity for grumbling. A true optimist, he says, a true optimist, like the author, will always find some positive thing or an enjoyable moment even in a totally negative situation. Chesterton says that such a positive view of a difficult situation is as logical and much more sensible than the complaining of an angry ratepayer. Angry ratepayer. Who is a ratepayer? Ratepayer is a term used in England to denote taxpayers. Normally, we always feel that as taxpayers, we have every right to question the government's policies because by paying tax, you are also supporting the government to function. You always feel irritated when the government takes a negative step or do nothing to ease out the problems in our society. So what Chesterton means to say is that instead of complaining always, if you try to take things positively, at least you feel less stressful. Real pain, as in the case of being burnt at Smithfield or having a toothache, is a positive thing. It can be supported but scarcely enjoyed. But after all, our toothaches are the exception, and as for being burnt at Smithfield, it only happens to us at the very longest intervals. See, he gives two examples of really painful situations. Number one, getting burned at Smithfield. Number two, having a toothache. Having a toothache, even though painful, can be considered a positive thing as it can be supported, as you can always seek the help of a doctor to cure it. But he also admits that it is painful which cannot be enjoyed even if you are a true optimist. So, he categorizes toothache as an exceptional case. But in the case of getting burned at Smithfield, Chesterton says it is something that happens at long intervals. Smithfield is originally known as Smoothfield, is a place located in central London, had been a place of public execution for over 400 years. Many witches and heretics had been burned, roasted or boiled alive there. Of the 288 people estimated to have been burned for heresy during the 5-year reign of Mary Tudor, Queen Mary of Tudor dynasty, 48 were burned in Smithfield. The author is telling us that atrocities like this are of course painful, can never be enjoyed, but such negative happenings never occur frequently, so there is no need to complain about them always. So these are the two examples he is giving us as really painful things. Coming to the next line. And most of the inconveniences that make men swear or women cry are really sentimental or imaginative inconveniences, things altogether of the mind. See, the author says, apart from the above two examples that he has already given, most of the inconveniences or difficulties are not really inconveniences. People are getting irritated because they are looking at them with a different mindset. G.K. Chesterton says most of the inconveniences are either sentimental or imaginary inconveniences. You take them either too emotionally or too imaginatively. That is why you feel such situations as inconveniences. He is giving an example. For instance, we often hear grown-up people complaining of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train. Did you ever hear a small boy complain of having to hang about a railway station and wait for a train? No. For to him, to be inside a railway station is to be inside a cavern of wonder and a palace of poetical pleasures. Because to him, the red light and the green light on the signal are like a new sun and a new moon. Because to him, When the wooden arm of the signal falls down suddenly, it is as if a great king had thrown down his staff as a signal and started a shrieking tournament of trains. See, he gives an example from our daily life, waiting for the train at a railway station. Mostly, the grown-ups complain about this waiting, whereas children never complain of it. Chesterton says this is because children divert their attention to the things that they see at the railway station. They are excited. They consider the railway station as a cavern of wonders. Cavern, I have given the meaning there. Cavern or cave is a natural void in the ground, specifically a space large enough for a human to enter. So they consider the railway station as a cavern of wonders, and the signals for them are like new sun and new moon. Do you see the picture of the signal I have shown here? Does it not look like sun and moon? Children are so imaginative, no? They think that the trains are participating in a tournament, like say a running race, and some great king, by throwing down his staff, is giving the signal to start the race. See, do you find any similarity in the stump that has the signals with the scepter that a king holds in his hands? Hope you know the meaning of scepter. Scepter is actually an ornamental staff that is also a royal symbol, which we call in Malayalam Chengol. Yes, so they are so imaginative that they are not bothered about the arrival of the train. They are utilizing their time in a very fruitful way. So that is the reason why they are not complaining. This is what Chesterton says. Coming to the next line. I myself am of the little boy's habit in this matter. They also serve who only stand and wait for the 2:15. Chesterton says he has also a child's mindset in this matter. And after all, those who wait patiently also are doing their duty. Now here, I want you to note that statement which I highlighted in yellow. They also serve who only stand and wait. This statement is actually the last line of a very famous poem written by John Milton. John Milton, in his poem On His Blindness, he has written this line, they also serve who only stand and wait, which means regardless of our ability or disability, we all have a place in this world and we all perform a function. Here I must say something about this particular poem, On His Blindness. It is actually a sonnet written by John Milton. John Milton, he lost his eyesight when he was 48. He wrote this poem on his blindness when his eyesight was declining. Milton patiently accepts his fate, and his faith to God is so strong that he says those who patiently wait for help will get their wishes fulfilled. Normally people will get irritated and they will start complaining. Instead of that, Milton is just accepting his fate and he is ready to submit himself before God, and he says that his patient submission will be rewarded. Like that, here also, standing in the railway station doing nothing, such people are also doing their work. They are waiting there for the 2:15. For the 2:15 means the train that is to come at 2:15. The 2:15 train. Their meditations may be full of rich and fruitful things. Chesterton is telling us that these people who are standing there, they are not wasting their time. They are immersed in thoughts. They are meditating upon certain fruitful things. He further says the people who are waiting actually may be thinking or meditating on some fruitful or great thoughts. Many of those most purple hours of my life have been passed at Clapham Junction, which is now, I suppose, underwater. Chesterton is telling us that he himself had waited at the railway station from where he caught his train to his home, Clapham Junction railway station. So he says many of the most purple hours, he is referring to the rich thoughts. Actually, purple is a color of richness. It symbolizes richness. He may be referring to the hours he had spent in meditating on rich ideas, or it may be because he was waiting there at the evening time when the sky is purple. It is a time just after sunset. Many of the most purple hours, the hours he had spent there, were rich in great thoughts, and he had spent such purple hours of his life there at Clapham Junction. He imagines that that place must also be underwater. He also says that Clapham Junction must be underwater because the whole of London is in floods. He further says, I have been there in many moods, so fixed and mystical that the water might well have come to my waist before I noticed it particularly. So Chesterton says, if he would have been there in that station now, he might not have noticed the waters until it reached his waist. This is because he would always be in deep thoughts while waiting for the train at the railway station. He won't get time to bother about the waters because he is keen in his thoughts. Again, he says, I have been there in many, yes, but in the case of such annoyances, as I have said, everything depends upon the emotional point of view. You can safely apply the test to almost every one of the things that are currently talked of as the typical nuisance of daily life. He says all the so-called annoyances means nuisance that causes mental irritation. All such annoyances depend upon your emotional point of view. He also says that this is true with all the daily activities which people usually refer to as nuisances. That is, if you change your perspective, your mindset, you may not feel them as nuisances. I have also given an analysis of this paragraph. I shall read it once. Chesterton admits that most of the people can't romanticize flood or fire, but he says such a romantic view is as logical and sensible than the irritations of the ordinary taxpayers. Then he talks about the two examples that are really painful. One is getting toothache, and the second one of the cruel execution procedure of killing people by burning them alive at Smithfield. According to him, toothache is really a painful thing which nobody can enjoy. He says this is an exceptional case. Burning people at Smithfield is an atrocity against humanity which happens only at long intervals. But according to him, most of the inconveniences that irritate people because they look at them in an imaginative or emotional way. He further gives us an example of a commonplace experience of waiting at the railway station that cause people lose their temper. Waiting so long irritates the adults, whereas children enjoy the time. Because for children, the whole place is so exciting that they spend their time fruitfully looking around the activities going on at the railway station. Chesterton is actually stressing the point that an optimistic point of view can always turn the so-called nuisances of our life to enjoyable experiences. I hope you understood this much very well. Shall we conclude here for today? Meanwhile, I want you to read the two paragraphs again with explanations and appreciations given. If you need clarifications, feel free to message me. We shall continue with the lesson in our next video. See you all then. Thank you.